Hello, and welcome to Robin Ellacott and the Running Hallows, Potter Echoes in the Most Recent Strike Novel. I'm Louise Freeman, recently retired psychology professor from Mary Baldwin University. I feel really privileged to be able to talk about a new J.K. Rowling novel less than a month after publication. So I would like to thank the conference organizers for making that possible. Yes, this is a new Rowling novel, even if her name is not on the cover. The Cormoran Strike series began in April 2013 with the publication of Robert Galbraith's The Cuckoo's Calling. This is an adult mystery series featuring detectives Cormoran Strike and Robin Ellacott as the series co-leads. The book got good reviews but not great sales until July 2013 when J.K. Rowling was revealed as the author. Then, of course, it became an instant bestseller. In February 2014, the UK Sunday Times reported that Rowling had mapped out a series of up to 7 crime novels in a repeat of the approach taken to Harry Potter. Now, Rowling instantly denied this and said there were not, in fact, 7 books planned, and for many years she would not say how many books she was considering for this series. There were 5 more published between 2014 and 2022. The books got increasingly longer and more complex, and in September 2022, Rowling announced that the series would end after 10 books. Then, just under a month ago, book number 7, The Running Grave, was published, and it is the longest to date. It has been clear almost since the beginning of the series that story elements from the Strike books are echoed in many of the corresponding Harry Potter books. I could list many points of correspondence, but in the interest of time, I'm only going to highlight the most general. Cormoran Strike is presented as an orphan protagonist, partially raised by an aunt and uncle, and he is caught between magical and mundane worlds. When you consider the equivalent to magic in the realistic Strike world is the lifestyle and privilege of the super rich and famous. Strike's father is a famous rock star, but Strike does not know him and grew up in poverty. In book 2, we have a mystery centered around this very dark and disturbing autobiographical book that is wreaking havoc in the community and ultimately gets someone killed. In book 3, there is a dangerous killer stalking and trying to kill one of the protagonists, so shades of Sirius Black there. It was in book 4 that the parallel series idea really became undeniable. Those of you familiar with the scientific method know that what makes a hypothesis or a scientific model strong is not its ability to only explain what you are currently seeing, it's its ability to predict future events. The first 2 books of the series were set in 2010. Right after the second book was published, I wrote a blog post and said, if this is a parallel series to Harry Potter, it would make sense to set the 4th book in 2012, at the time of the London Olympics. Not only was that exactly what happened, but the Cliff Notes summary of both books could read like this. Our heroes meet a nasty-tempered government minister who is responsible for the success of a major international sporting event and who has recently helped his disowned criminal son get out of prison. It does not go well. There's also nearly identical language used in the climax of both books, when the killer is holding the protagonist in a room, has just made a big reveal, and has raised their weapon to kill. Help arrives at the nick of time. In Goblet of Fire, with a great splintering and crashing, the door of Moody's office was blasted apart. And in Lethal White, with a great splintering of wood, the door crashed open. So you can see or read about a lot more connections between these 2 books in John Granger's chapter in The Ivory Tower, Harry Potter and Beyond, the book we just heard about in Lana's panel. So, either we are dealing with an author of limited imagination or highly restricted vocabulary, or this similarity was intentionally planned, and I choose to believe the latter. In the more recent books, we continue to see Potter echoes, but not with the same one-to-one correspondence. The first time I read Book 5, Troubled Blood, I saw echoes to Order of the Phoenix, like I expected. The story was set in motion by a medium's prophecy, and there's the death of a surrogate parent. However, it was also very clear that there were very strong parallels to the Half-Blood Prince, starting with the word blood in both titles. But in particular, there is an old handwritten book that the detectives find that contains some bizarre but very helpful instructions that are key to this mystery. There's also a pretty strong resemblance to Deathly Hallows. The book is set on a year-long cycle, very much like a Harry Potter book. There's a very dark Christmas where a lot of bad things happen, and then there's a very healing burial at Easter time. And the book ends with Strike having a mental duel with a psychopath who is caught by one of his own mental tricks. In other words, he is defeated by his own rebounding spell. Now, pretty much the same thing happened in the sixth book. There were connections again to Half-Blood Prince. The main one for me is the lack of a twist. The person who you have been told is the bad guy all the way through the book does in fact turn out to be the bad guy, unlike most of the other books. Beatrice Groves and Irving Cateman have also written quite a lot about the connections between those books, and you can find their essays online. But as far as connections to Order of the Phoenix, the entire book centers around the power of the media to slander and discredit. There's also the enemy is a white supremacist group, so a group very much like the Death Eaters, and there's a very Snape-like murder of the right-hand man. So, what about Book 7? Are there parallels between The Running Grave and Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows? Well, absolutely. I have documented many on my own blog, but the main ones are these. The agency target is the Universal Humanitarian Church, which is a religious cult led by Jonathan Weiss, who's charismatic, sadistic, and power-hungry, very much like Voldemort. His followers call him Papa J and worship 5 immortal prophets whose names are not spoken. One is even called you-know-who at one point. The cult employs mind control techniques that resemble the Imperius Curse. Robin, who is going undercover, has to leave the familiar environment we've seen her in the last 6 books to live for several months on the cult farm, out of contact with family and friends and isolated from news. Food is particularly sparse and unappetizing on this farm, just like on the trio's camping trip. There's another character, Mama Mizzou, who is Papa J's wife and second in command. She looks and behaves a lot like Bellatrix Lestrange, particularly her specialization in torture. And Robin has a physical fight with her at the end of the book, where the safety of children in the community is at stake. So I think you see something very similar to Molly Weasley's duel with Bellatrix at the end. So now I'm going to take you through and therefore spoil a very small sliver from the middle of the book. 7 chapters, less than 30 pages out of 945, so don't worry, there is plenty left. But over 24 hours of book time, Robin experiences much of the second half of Deathly Hallows, from the Silver Doe chapter to the Battle of Hogwarts. There's a near drowning in a baptismal pool. There's imprisonment and torture in a manor house. She voluntarily undergoes a symbolic death, where her will is broken and she wants to give up. She then goes to a place of solitude for reflection and information, where she is reinvigorated. She chooses to return to her mission. There's a dramatic escape from the cult compound and from the mind control. So, the near drowning. The scene starts in a temple ceremony where the membership is gathered around the pool in which the members were earlier baptized. Robin has come under suspicion by the cult leadership. So she is called to the pool to, quote, receive the drowned prophet's blessing. So she steps into the pool, expecting to submerge, touch the bottom, and come back up again. Instead, she's grabbed by a cord around her ankles and pulled down. This is very similar to what happened to Harry in the frozen pond when he's strangled by the Horcrux chain. Now, both Harry and Robin lose consciousness underwater, then are pulled out. Now, Harry comes to face down on the forest floor and then hears the voice of his best mate, Ron. There's this wonderful reconciliation and the Horcrux destruction. Robin is not so lucky. She comes to face up, staring into the face of her worst enemy, Tau, who is Papa J's son. Now, her best mate, Strike, is waiting for her outside the compound wall, searching the woods for her with night vision goggles, but has no way of finding her inside the temple or knowing what is happening. And of course, we don't have magical tools like Deluminators or Doe Patronuses to help them find each other. So Robin is taken to some place that's, believe it or not, is even worse. She is taken to the farmhouse, which is this very fancy, renovated big house on the farm. She's interrogated and given a choice, either to immediately be expelled from the group or to perform a penance. Now, Robin does not want to leave because she hasn't gotten the information she needs, so she actually signs a form consenting to receive their punishment. What happens is she is made to assume a kneeling posture in a coffin-like box, the lid is then locked, and she is left like that for 8 hours. So I think this is analogous to both Harry's surrender in the Forbidden Forest and to Hermione's torture in Malfoy Manor. In a way, since there's no magic mirror and there's no Dobby, we get to see what might have happened in Malfoy Manor if Dobby hadn't shown up. What happens is that Robin undergoes a symbolic death. Her only option is to simply wait out the time. She has no way of escaping or contacting anyone. She emerges physically alive, but emotionally dead. Resistance to the cult is almost gone. Nothing mattered to her now except the approval of the church principles. She must comply. Compliance was the only safety. So in a way, Robin is her own Dobby, which is actually appropriate because her last name, Ellacott, means elf house. So, by the time she is released, it is morning. So she is taken from the box in the basement to a filthy, dirty, dark attic room and told that her daily job is going to be looking after Jacob. Now, Jacob turns out to be a severely disabled child who the cult has locked away. Papa J has said that this child has no soul and ordered all care withdrawn from him, so they're basically letting him die. So Robin sees Jacob lying in his crib. He's sleeping. He is older than toddler age, but he's only about 3 feet tall. He's naked except for a diaper. He has a sunken face and thin skin stretched over bones. Arms and legs are described as atrophied, and he's covered in bruises and sores. Now, those of us who have been with Harry to King's Cross, this should sound like a familiar description. And of course, it's very much like the soul fragment child Harry sees there. Now, in Harry's case, Dumbledore shows up, tells him that the soul fragment child is beyond our help, but provides Harry with all the information that Harry's been wanting, and so Harry makes the choice to return to battle. Well, Robin has to be her own Dumbledore, just like she had to be her own Dobby. So in this room, she spends 10 hours caring for Jacob. She does not believe he is beyond hope, and she does everything she can to keep him alive and keep him comfortable. Now, the role of Dumbledore, interestingly enough, is played by newspapers that are covering the floor in this attic room. So Robin reads them as a way of passing the time and gets information from them. Now, this is the first news she's had in 4 months that is not filtered through the cult leaders. It has a strange effect on her. It feels like this news is coming from a different galaxy. She's been so isolated, but it starts to pull her mentally back towards the outer world. So Robin realizes she has a choice. She can give in to her exhaustion, be cautious, stay safe, comply with the cult control, or she can try to get help for Jacob, take the risk, and try to escape. So it's a combination of compassion for Jacob and some very specific information she gets from the newspapers and from Emily. Emily's another cult member who comes to relieve her at the end of the day. She gives this information, gives her the strength she needs. So her shift ends. Emily comes to relieve her. Robin's taken back downstairs, back to Papa J, who tells her that there's one more step. Before she can rest, she must, quote, spirit bond with Tau. In other words, she must have sex with them. So she agrees. They're heading off to the cabins where spirit bonding takes place, but she asks for a bathroom visit first. So she's actually allowed into the women's dormitory and enters the women's restroom where other women are getting ready for bed, and there's a row of sinks that have high windows above them. Here's what happens. Robin pushed her way into the bathroom. In one fluid movement, Robin had stepped up onto the sink and had forced the window open, heaved herself up on the high sill, swung one leg over, and let herself fall. Now, this description evokes 2 different scenes from Deathly Hallows. The first is the trio's escape from Gringotts. Climbing out of a bathroom window may not sound as exciting as riding a dragon, but you have some very similar language with the trio climbing up the dragon's leg, pulling themselves up to its back. The dragon climbing up from the vaults into the marble hallway and then out through the doors and launching itself into the sky. You also have a bit of similar imagery. You have this row of marble sinks in the bathroom. You have this marble hallway in Gringotts that has rows of goblins. So I think there's a comparison there. The second allusion is to the Battle of Hogwarts and that wonderful moment when the supposedly dead Harry is resurrected, an act that occurs in sync with Neville's finest moment. Harry pulled the invisibility cloak from inside his robes, swung it over himself, and sprang to his feet as Neville moved too. In one swift, fluid motion, Neville broke free of the body-bind curse upon him, and then, of course, he reaches into the sorting hat and grabs the sword of Gryffindor and kills Nagini. Now, Robin has thrown off the mind control of the cult in the same way that Neville threw off the body-bind curse. Now, Robin hasn't killed her last Horcrux yet. Remember, we're only halfway through her book. But she does escape the farm with information that will eventually bring the cult down. So, in conclusion, there is strong evidence of thematic and narrative connections between the Harry Potter series and the first 7 Cormoran Strike and Robin Ellacott detective novels. Connections are especially strong between the 4th and the 7th volumes. In a brief section midway through The Running Grave, Robin relives key events from the second half of Deathly Hallows. She alternates playing the roles of Harry, Hermione, Dobby, Dumbledore, and Neville. She experiences real-world trials like Deathly Hallows events in the Forest of Dean, in Malfoy Manor, Gringotts, King's Cross Station, and the Battle of Hogwarts. At book's end, she stands in for Molly Weasley and fights Mama Mizzou to save the community's children. So, thank you. I look forward to questions and discussion.